fans, and thanks for joining us for another edition of All 90s Action All the Time, as we come to the conclusion of our epic 90s Seagal journey. I'm one of your hosts, Scott Murphy, and on today's episode, we'll be looking at The Patriot. Who do I mean by we, you say? Of course I mean my two co-hosts. First up, we have podcaster, screenwriter, and a man who throws at least two people through a glass pane before breakfast, Mr. Kyle Hintz.
Howdy.
And alongside him, we have podcaster, screenwriter, and a man who is desperate to wrap this season up for the sake of his own sanity, Mr. Craig Draheim. So
Thanks for having me.
That's good comic timing right there, Craig. So now on to today's flick, which, as I mentioned, is 1998's The Patriot, which was directed by Dean Semler. This was his directorial debut. His only other directorial credits is for a film called Firestorm, which also came out in 1998 and was a kind of fireman kind of action flick, which also did not get good reviews. But he is also an Academy Award-winning cinematographer. He won his Academy Award for Dances with Wolves, and he was also the director of photography on Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, and Beyond the Thunderdome as well, and a whole bunch of other things. So, yeah, interesting credits. Talking of credits as well, the writers of this film, people who wrote the screenplay, a Mr. M. Sussman and a Mr. John Kingswell, no other credits. The IMDb only lists this, and that's it. They were never seen again. The film was also based on a science fiction novel called The Last Canadian, which is a 1974 novel by a writer called William Hine. And you know what this film has in common with the novel? Absolutely fucking nothing. Apart from the fact that there is a deadly plague in this movie, and there is a deadly man-made plague in the novel as well. That's it. The characters aren't the same. The locations aren't the same. The events aren't the same. It's a kind of like end of the world kind of type deal, apparently, in the novel. It's genuinely, I don't even know why they bought the rights to this novel when they were not going to make the film of the novel. They made this film instead, whatever reason. And this film is also notable for the fact that it was Seagal's first effort after parting ways with Warner Brothers. And although it was originally scheduled for a theatrical release, it became Seagal's first of many direct-to-video. In terms of reviews, it currently holds a 4.2 on IMDb, 20% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 10 reviews. It doesn't have a Metacritic score, so we'll skip that. And a 2.0 on Letterboxd. So, first of all, have either of you seen this film before?
No.
Kyle has not?
No.
I have, but I didn't remember it whatsoever. Like, I saw it like 20 years ago, retained no memory of it. I think, as I mentioned previously to you guys, I might have mentioned previously, actually on the podcast, that my only memory of it was that it was quite dull, and it didn't have a lot of action, and that was it. And the movie is quite dull, and it doesn't have a lot of action.
To be fair, I watched it yesterday and still can't remember most of it. It doesn't retain well.
Doesn't. That's why I watched it this morning, and I mean, it's fading. It's definitely like it kind of gently moseys along, and then it just kind of disappears from your mind. It's good that I did write down plot notes for the movie. The plot notes my plot notes actually start with the very first word I wrote was patriotism! Because I just thought that the music that comes over the credits is so kind of like America. That's what I felt.
No, I agree. I mean, I feel like it didn't. The movie itself ended up not being as epic as that.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Like, yeah, the movie starts kind of epic because it has like that score that comes in, and then it has Craig's favorite thing, beautiful nature shots to open the movie. Like, I knew you'd be excited to see that, Craig.
That was my first note, actually, is beautiful landscape. An exclamation point.
Like the first sentence of my plot notes is patriotism, beautiful nature shots, bird noise. So, given like On Deadly Ground and Fire Down Below, I knew you'd be excited to see all those elements in your Seagal film.
Yeah, it is my favorite niche of the Seagal films. But I was saying this one, it felt very much, and it makes sense that he did cinematography for Dances with Wolves, because there's so much of it that feels like they're trying to make like a 90s kind of Western revision, all of what they were doing in the 90s with like Dances with Wolves or Unforgiven or all of those films.
Yeah. Oh, unlike those films, this film is set in the then present day.
Yeah.
And then, yes, so like talking about Westerns, like just after we get like lots of nature shots of the lovely landscape of Montana, we get epic Western music, like, and we see Seagal and his friend L.K. Jones riding around on their horses, doing some cattle wrangling. It seems, kind of throwing ropes around, and yeah, that's what they're doing. And then, and then we see that. Like, I noticed as well, how we talked a little bit about how in Fire Down Below, there wasn't a lot of, like, how badass is Seagal? Like, how badass is his character? Well, yeah. I realized that again, he would reset to, like, being like, oh, how badass is his character as being his kind of trope in his movies going into the 2000s. But I feel like the replacement for how badass is this guy in Fire Down Below in this movie is like how generous stroke kind-hearted stroke saintly stroke wise is this character. Like, cause people like keep mentioning is great intellect and wisdom and general generosity and saintliness. And they kind of do the same thing in Fire Down Below. So I think that he just did a kind of temporary replacement of the how badass thing.
I think so too. That's why we see him, giving
Greg?
Oh, no, yeah. Kyle can go first.
Okay.
I was just going to say that I think that's why we see him vaccinating the cattle or whatever. But then also we get the kind of incongruity later when we have the couple action scenes we do where it's like, okay, why are you such a badass though?
Yeah, not the world's greatest immunologist, but he just has like martial arts skills because he worked for the CIA. So of course he must have had some sort of physical training as well. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that'll be it. I think, yeah. So, like, after those, I also, like, just to show how saintly he is as well, we get a really kind of hilarious, cheesy moment where there's this, like we get, like, the eagle caw sound. Caw! And then that notifies Frank, played by L.K. Jones, as I said, and Seagal's character, Dr. Wesley McLaren, to go over and help out a wounded small horse back and take it back to the ranch, which I thought was quite funny. Like,
he helps out by just like sticking with or giving it some sort of shot and then carrying it. There's not really any sort of evidence of what is wrong with it. It's just, I'll just give it the same shot I was giving these cattle.
Yes. Yeah. And I can't remember, like, can you remember the line that Frank says about, like, oh, I'm not sure you're funky moon juice or jungle juice or something? Like, he just gives an odd line about, like, we'll help this animal, which I was, again, I thought was quite funny. No,
I can't remember.
It's fair enough. Fair enough. Anyway, so, like, we have kind of dueling narratives because we also have an FBI standoff going on, and we get introduced to our villains, who are a kind of a right-wing militia, which seems very on the pulse for 2021. Do you want to talk about that one, Craig?
They were mentioning it because of there we go. They're mentioning it because of that. It was in connection with Waco and everything, but then of course, with what's happening, especially in the United States right now, it became really relevant. But this militia is led, and they're kind of holed up there, and he's talking about going back to the days of the founding fathers and then leading fight for new America. But he's going to finally kind of give himself up, and we don't know fully why yet, but he decides to takes some sort of shot and puts something in his mouth as a liquid, but he's just going to give himself up to the FBI after this long stand up and his spiel to all of his men that are willing to die for him.
Yeah. Like, it's quite a weird scene. Like, we're trying to establish this guy is like our big bad villain, and we open up onto him in his ranch, basically giving his militia a kind of patriotic pop quiz. I thought was a kind of weird way to introduce our villain.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that it's it's coming to the end of this standoff that we don't know how they got in this position in the first place, other than that they're obviously crazed right-wingers.
Yeah, because it's suggested by... Yeah, Craig?
Well, I was just saying, it doesn't even feel like a standoff either. It just feels like they're just hanging out in their little, center. Or whatever.
I know what you mean. It doesn't seem like, there's anybody like kind of guarding the windows or like barricading themselves in, or like it just seems like they're, like you say, like they're just having like a kind of one of their militia meetings while the FBI stand outside pointing guns at them. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And like you say, Kyle, there's no kind of sense of like how long it's suggested that this has been going on for a while, like maybe several days or something, because like in the kind of follow-up scene with Dr. Wesley McLaren and his daughter, Holly McLaren, she talks about like walking up onto the hill, and he says like, what have I said about, doing that, and, like it's dangerous and stuff like that. So like there's this suggestion that, this has obviously been going on like a while. At least several days.
Yeah.
And, so, like, the other thing I liked about this scene was before he takes the shot of what is clearly some sort of biological weapon or something, because you get a close-up shot of the vial that says, like, NAM 37, and you're just like, oh, that sounds like the name of an evil chemical or whatever. And, but the other thing, and again, maybe this is just because it's directed by a cinematographer, so he just wanted some fun shots in there. Like, there's a shot of him, like, he goes, the main guy, Floyd, he goes up to the window to look out at the agents, and there's just this, like fast zoom out, and then, and then we look at the agents, and then they kind of look back towards the house, and then there's this fast zoom back into the house. And I was just like, that seems pointless, but sure, just show off a bit of skill there.
Yes. He does the same fast zoom out, I think when Frank gets to the hospital or something, where it's the same thing, where it's this crazy pull out.
Yeah.
For no reason. Well, I mean, you're revealing that the hospital's full, I guess, but it's like...
Yeah, I think, but I think both times it's just kind of style for the sake of it, of just being like, what would be fun to just have like a fast zoom here. Yeah, cool. Looks good.
Yeah.
And then... So, and then we get the first of many padding scenes where, like, Seagal, or we should maybe refer to him as Dr. Wesley McLaren, just, like, cooking breakfast and, like, talking with his daughter, making terrible dad jokes, and we're trying to establish him as, like, a good solid single father, well caring, makes his kid breakfast, bullies him into doing their homework. You wanted to talk a little bit about his father, like him being portrayed as a father figure, Craig.
So, yeah. So at first, I'm like, oh, well, I think Seagal, just like the last movie, is trying a little more of that acting thing a little bit. And so it's working better. But then, like, as it goes on, I get more into it. It feels like not like a father relationship. It feels like, random uncle or something who's just kind of giving little jokes or stuff like that than actually being because an authentic father. Because there is so many points too that he just like lets her do whatever or doesn't really seem to care too much despite her being in danger. Well, spoiler for later in the movie, but he lets her kind of do whatever for a while.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But like, yeah, he kind of comes in and out of being parental, any sort of kind of parental figure. But I mean, he does. And there's an interesting scene. Well, it's not an interesting scene, but it's just a scene that happens that's kind of odd when they're like driving into town, and he's talking to his daughter, and he says like, "Oh, you realize it looks like you're making a mess of that homework." And he says, "Oh, you realize when you get it right, it's me. When you get it wrong, it's like that's from your mum's side," which kind of makes it seem like, oh, he had like a messy divorce or something. But you find out later that is not.
Yeah, I noticed that, and all I could think is just Seagal, even when he's trying to look virtuous and good, is like still going to be a condescending asshole.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Well, he gets to the point where it pops up later, and I can't remember now, but he makes a little joke with her that doesn't feel like a dad joke at all, where he's talking about, you can't get married until you're 40, which, yeah, is fine, whatever. It could be a dad joke, but he doesn't.
Oh, no, he doesn't say you can't get married. Like, you can't date until you're 40. That's
yeah.
I mean, yeah.
He also says right before that, don't flirt with anybody to like a 10-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Don't flirt with anybody.
That's that's the part that I mean. It's like, why would you tell that to, because she's not like a preteen or a teenager or anything. It's like, she's definitely a small child, and it just comes off very creepy to me.
Yes, no, it does come off very creepy. Because, like, yes, I mean, the actress Camilla Bell, she could only have been like 10 or something when this movie was made. So yeah, it comes off particularly strange. But so I can understand your point about it being this kind of weird relationship that occasionally father. She was born in 1986, so she would have been, it came out in 98, but probably filmed in 97. She would have been about 11 when this was filmed.
Okay.
So it's a very odd comment to make. It's a very odd comment to write in a script, to be fair, as well. I don't know if it's like a Seagal line or because of, we know what he's like, but, or if it was actually in the script, which either or. So this is very strange from somebody. And also talking about very strange moments as well, like when they're driving into town, there's like a kind of blockade because of the standoff and all that kind of stuff. And Seagal has a little conversation with his friend Frank, and they're talking about the militia. And he makes this comment about like, oh, I don't mind people playing army, and like some of them are probably good, So and throughout the movie, it has like this kind of weird ambivalence towards far-right militias.
Yeah, it seems like...
Yeah,
I mean,
does this...
I wonder how much...
You can go, Kyle.
Okay. I wonder how much that reflects Seagal's actual, like, opinions, or if Seagal is that aware that, like, there's probably a lot of right-wing fans or something, and he doesn't want to, like, offend them.
But if that were true, why would they make, like, On Deadly Ground, or all the other movies that would offend any kind of right-wing Republican fans that he has? I mean, like, I think...
Right, I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. I think because... It's weird because, like, the militia in the news clip is described as like a neo-Nazi militia. And yet the way they act out, they seem like just like one of those kind of conspiracy obsessed kind of libertarian militias. But like they don't seem like a kind of like white power movement. They just seem like a kind of gun nut stroke, the government's out to get us kind of militia. You know what I mean?
They probably had to do that again to not, I feel like, upset too many of the fan. That becomes that fan base that Kyle was talking about. Of if you're like, oh, they're Nazis, that's not the same thing as, don't take our guns away type of thing, But I mean, the whole kind of, even the leader, I forgot to mention, he fits the look where it's like all these people that definitely don't have the appearance that they could be in the military themselves or do things like that. But and they're all kind of selfish when, put to the, under pressure. And
yeah, they've got a lot of bluster, but they're cowardly.
Yeah.
And then, so I mean, like, after that, we get the kind of, we see the first, bit of, like the trial of Floyd, and, he's going into the courtroom, and we get this kind of weird shot of like Floyd and Dr. Wesley McLaren kind of lock eyes as if, oh, we'll meet again.
Yeah. And it's a very informal trial, by the way. It's just...
Yeah, for a standoff that's been, like apparently going on for days, and the FBI's involved, these federal agents are involved. It's just like this little county court, as if it's like dealing with a parking fine or something.
Yeah, none of it makes sense. I mean, it's also like he gets arrested and goes right to trial. I mean, you would be arraigned, which seems like sort of that's what's happening, and then you would go on trial later. None of it makes any goddamn sense.
Nope, not at all. Not at all. But anyway, we get Seagal. We get introduced to the fact that he is a doctor. He is Dr. Wesley McLaren, and we see him at his practice. And this scene would not be worth mentioning, but for two things. One, it's a funny scene because, like, Seagal has this moment where he just, like, shit talks Western medicine and being like, yeah, like, Western medicine is just, they're just prolonging illnesses. I'm here to cure illnesses. And, there's also, we get the sight of Dr. Wesley McLaren's assistant who comes in and out of the room a couple of times. And you'd be like, well, this is a weird side character, Scott. Why would you talk about her? Well, because it's played by Ayako Fujitani, who is Steven Seagal's daughter. I just thought that'd be a fun fact.
And who never really shows up again.
Apparently, yeah, she has starred in a couple of Japanese movies, and apparently is a respected fiction and non-fiction writer in Japan. But this is the only film that she starred with her dad, and yeah, it's like for like all of 5 seconds of screen time or something.
And you have the hillbilly character of Clem. There's a lot of great kind of southerner names that they have to throw in here.
Yes. Because like all Steven Seagal movies, like whatever base they're from, it's always the most stereotype, caricatured version of the thing that he is, the kind of place and location that he is in. But yeah, so in that scene as well, the scene does become important because he gets a phone call. And who does he get a phone call from, Kyle?
I don't remember the character's name, but he is another doctor.
The character's name is Richard Back, and he's played by Dan Bean.
Yes, and he is an old doctor colleague who is working with the government and trying to enlist Seagal, but he can't tell him any of the details.
And this is where we get as well the kind of, like, not the how badass is he, but how knowledgeable stroke wise stroke saintly he is, because after he kind of declines Richard's offer to work on like a case, a kind of a contagion case, then he hangs up and there's obviously military guys in Richard's office, and they're like, well, just phone the next guy on the list. And then Richard's like, there is no next guy. Meaning that Seagal is the only man in the country, the only immunologist in the country who could possibly work on this.
But he does give the great hint to him that apparently pops up a bunch. Plastic beakers.
Yes. Yes, plastic beakers. Yeah, we get more plastic beakers just in a minute. Like talking about his weird relationship with his daughter, there's a bit where like one of his patients gives him like a blueberry pie or whatever, and then the daughter asks like, oh, what's that? And he's like, oh, it's like a blueberry pie. We'll have it for dessert. And then he explains the concept of dessert. He's like, dessert is something that you have after dinner. I was like, I mean, she's 11. She's not an idiot, as far as I'm aware.
All people are idiots in comparison to the greatness of Steven Seagal's intellect.
I mean,
I wonder if it was one of those bits that were meant to be a joke, whereas like,
oh yeah, and he just didn't read it as a joke.
But it just, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose maybe he just didn't see the joke, or like, unlike the kind of earlier bit where he's doing some terrible dad jokes, maybe he just didn't read it as like a funny line, and so just said the line as it was on the page, and that was that. But yeah, it could have been a kind of joke of sorts, like just being like explaining the concept of dessert to a child who's presumably had a bunch of desserts at this stage already, or maybe she's not. Maybe this is the first time they've ever this is a treat that they've been really building up to, of like, one day you'll be old enough for dessert. But anyway,
Steven Seagal doesn't eat dessert.
No, I don't want to talk too much about his weight, but like, I mean, it doesn't look like a man who avoids dessert necessarily. I mean, maybe he does. Maybe it's just all like steaks and stuff. I don't know. But anyway, we get on to the kind of the actual plot of the movie. So we didn't mention in the trial that Floyd spits in the face of the judge, which is very important because the judge is the first victim of the virus, and he is taken into a hospital, and Dr. Wesley McLaren is obviously called in because everybody knows about his great immunologist skills, and he for some reason is totally aware that this is some sort of biochemical thing, but seems perfectly okay with just like handling the patient, bare hands and stuff like that. Not kind of like, no need to kind of disinfect for him, no need to, he's not suddenly panicked that he's got the virus or anything like that, like everybody else in the room. But, because he has greater knowledge, and he's just immune because he is. And then we get, I think like one of the most confusing scenes in the movie when the doctor, he's basically mentions to the doctor that it's like, this is like an outbreak. An outbreak is kind of happening, but he just says like plastic beakers, and the doctor's like, what does that mean? And then he goes on this kind of weird rambling point about like, oh, well, you don't use glass beakers because, glass beakers might injure the monkeys or whatever. And you're like, what? That's not going to clarify anything to this guy. Just tell him that there's like a contagious outbreak. There's like, tell him of what you suspect this is. This is some sort of like weapon, what's this weird beaker rant about? I don't know. Did that amuse anybody else?
Sounds like, yeah. No, it sounds like somebody found out that little bit of information. The screenwriters or Seagal, probably the screenwriters, and went for it of like, yeah, look how knowledgeable and cool we are knowing this. Let's like really use it more.
Yeah. And, so, but then he does actually do something, and he calls his old friend Richard back, and he orders him, like, Richard back. And he orders them to get the military in, and Richard Bach does. He gets the military in, and apparently there's a 20-mile perimeter, and we see the military coming down, and once they arrive, once Richard and the military arrive, Seagal gives he does a bit of Seagal speechifying as he preaches against the stockpiling of biological warfare, because whether it's us or whether it's the Chinese or the Russians, it's going to kill the whole goddamn human race. That's what he says. And when Seagal speaks, everybody listens and is cowed by his mighty knowledge. But tell us, Craig. Craig, what happens next?
Let me look at my notes. So after that, this is when, don't we get back to Chisholm, Floyd Chisholm, of realizing that he kind of is he's visited by his, I guess, second in command.
Oh yeah, actually, yes, he is visited by his second in command. I was just looking at my notes. I did want to mention one little thing before that scene. There's a couple of kind of just like weird little moments that happen in the film that are kind of glossed over, not mentioned, and it's like we just get on with things, but they just seem like odd. And there's a bit just before Pogue, that's the right-hand man guy, arrives, and there's a policeman outside the courthouse, and he ties a flask of coffee and 4 donuts to a rope and then sends them up to a guy on the roof. And I just thought, like, that's a bit random. Did you catch that?
Yeah. There's supposed to be... Yeah, it's supposed to be a whole kind of... Well, it'll pop up in a second, but a whole kind of federal army that's securing Floyd, even though they're kind of useless later on. But yeah, it's a funny bit, and it's not really ever explained. You just kind of see it float up as Poe is coming up, dressed in his get-up as a public defender, I guess, and he's just let through pretty easily.
Yeah, she just flashes something like some sort of ID in his wallet, and just he's like, "Oh, I'm the counselor," and then he's just let in. He's just let into the courthouse, even though the town has been put on lockdown because of the virus, and the courthouse is heavily armed because this apparently very dangerous head militia guy has been detained. But it's all very simply done because this movie doesn't need to explain itself apparently. But yeah, tell us what happens in the jail, Craig.
So when Poe is talking to Floyd, Floyd is asking for another shot, which you're thinking is the vaccination, but Poe kind of tells him that it's not actually a vaccination, but rather it only kind of postpones the effects of the virus. So that means all that kind of took ingested the virus to spread this disease or whatever they're all dying, and they need to find another way out. And this is kind of fits with the perfect of these like leaders of these groups, because then you really see Floyd become the coward, and he's like just willing to sacrifice all of his troops and for his safety. And, he's kind of throwing out all of his rhetoric that he was saying in the beginning.
Yeah. And I was also going to... I don't know about you guys, but I felt like this scene was kind of really weirdly filmed. Just the way it's kind of shot in these kind of tight close-ups through the bars, like through like little squares of the bars of the jail cell. Just seemed oddly shot to me. I don't know if either of you guys felt the same.
Yeah, it felt almost Silence of the Lambs like. Yeah. For no reason. And it also felt like, this is a dumb logic thing to point out, but I was like, I feel like the guard can hear everything you guys are saying. He's right there.
That's a fair point. Yeah. So, yeah, like, I think after this is like the shot you were talking about, Kyle, about like Frank comes into the hospital and there's like a weird kind of zoom across like the kind of line of people who are queuing up to get the shot that we now know is completely ineffective. And so like this is something I mentioned before the podcast started that I wanted to talk about a little is I don't know if you guys came up with any theories, but I wrote in my notes, why is Frank so obedient to Wesley? Now in the first scene, in the breakfast scene, he's like kind of kicked out the house and like ordered to get coffee, which he just kind of nods and was like, yes, I'll do that. And then Frank is like laying his charm on the woman who gave Dr. Wesley McLaren the blueberry pie, and he's reassuring people. And then, he comes up to the Richard back and he's really chewing them out, and he seems like a kind of confident, swaggering kind of guy, and yet every time Dr. Wesley McLaren speaks to him, he does exactly what he says, and there's this exact same thing in this scene where he's chewing Richard back out, and then Wesley is like, don't you think there's bigger things at hand here? And then he says, he doesn't even just say yes, he says, yes, sir, and then walks out the scene. And as L.Q. Jones is obviously much older than Seagal, like is a senior, it seems weird, and it just seems weird.
It seems weird, but it seems appropriate for Seagal. He can never. It doesn't matter that L.Q. Jones is older and more experienced and a better actor. Seagal has to be the one in charge.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it kind of, we were talking about this before. Well, first of all, L.Q. Jones directed A Boy and His Dog, so he can't do no wrong. But
I've still never seen A Boy and His Dog. I've heard about it. I've heard it's supposed to be nuts, and I've heard that it's a really interesting film. But yeah, I know. I recently listened to the Junk Food Cinema episode on it, but still never seen it. So I do want to check it out at some stage.
No, make sure to check it out. It's a lot of fun.
Okay. And also, like, if any listener is not aware of L.K. Jones, you will have almost certainly seen him if you have watched a Western from the 60s or 70s. Basically, whether on TV or in the movies, this man his face just says Western. So, like, you've definitely seen him somewhere.
Yeah, but so before we started recording, we were talking about I was mentioning, it feels like in the movie that Dr. Wesley would have been the older character, and that the Frank would have almost been like the kind of younger character that viewed Wesley as like his mentor, or was a hired hand or something like that from him.
Yeah, I suppose, and I suppose the relationship would make a bit more sense that way. I mean, the fact that the character seems so cowed by Dr. Wesley, it seems a bit weird, but I suppose it does seem like one of those kind of, like the relationship between, it doesn't even really feel like the relationship between Batman and Alfred, because Alfred can be sarcastic to him sometimes, or like, I don't know, like one of those kind of Lone Ranger Tonto, Green Hornet Kato, I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is where, like, not a lot has happened. We have covered pretty much almost half of the film, and this is kind of, we're really elongating the highlights of what has happened in the first 40 minutes of the movie. But at about the 42-minute mark, we get some action. Tell us about the action, Kyle.
Yes, these crazy militiamen break Floyd out of prison pretty easily, and they all kind of descend on the town, killing a lot of the army quarantine people and taking over the hospital because they've got to figure out a proper vaccination.
In my notes here. I was entertained by two things in the courthouse attack. First of all, I've written here, soldiers taken out by invisible bullets, because we don't really see the hits initially when they're being shot at the courthouse. And then I also put no budget for explosion, because there's a scene where they've taken out the rooftop guards, and then they're going to go into the courthouse to break Foyle out of jail, and they roll like what is like an explosion into the courthouse, and they shut the door, and then it explodes off camera, and then you just see the aftermath of like the bloody walls and a couple of kind of dead guys, and that's it. And I was like, okay, just run out of budget or something, maybe.
Yeah, it all felt like way too easy, like just because.
What I didn't get either is that.
Go for it, Craig.
Yeah, in this kind of whole ordeal, they even kill a lot of the doctors that would be helping to like find a cure. So they're kind of counter effective in their whole like scheme. Well,
you're neglecting his Floyd's number one henchman / like genius virologist that we're gonna discover in like the next scene.
Yes, so like yes, we also kind of discussed this briefly before we started rolling in the podcast of like Pogue, who is played by Silas Weir Mitchell, who like I always remember from like My Name Is Earl. He's kind of like. He's the Everett McGill. He is the John C. McGinley. He is henchman number one. And yet, suddenly, he puts on a pair of glasses and he's like maverick, magic science guy who suddenly has all this science knowledge, who suddenly knows all about blood work and knows, what to do, and isolates the fact that Seagal's daughter is the one, not his actual daughter, his daughter within the film, is the one who is, has got the blood that's immune to it, and they need to get Holly, and it's just like it just comes out of nowhere, because up until this point he's just seemed like a goon.
Well, and we also established the power of glasses because later. When Seagal's making his ID, and then when he's like doing stuff in the lab, he throws sunglasses.
Yeah, I did feel like there was like a script note somewhere that was like intellect equals glasses. Oh dear. But like you said, Craig, they're just like killing indiscriminately, like killing like a lot of doctors that seem like they could be very helpful, and then when they've kind of already taken control of the hospital, then Floyd like kills like another doctor, and Pogue seems very, kind of flustered by that of like, oh, well, this is too far, like even though they've already like killed like a whole bunch of people. Like they've wiped out a whole bunch of military guys, a whole bunch of like federal agents, but like it's just one doctor too far for him. But then he forgets about that in the next scene and is just like, I'm henchman number one. I'm your number one guy. But then I suppose like expecting character consistency from this film is a step too far, is it not?
Yeah.
And then we get one of our rare bits of Seagal action in this movie, like pretty much, this is one of like two scenes where Seagal fights. Do you want to tell us about that, Craig?
Sure. So they find out that they need Holly, the Seagal or Wesley's daughter, and nonchalantly tells her to hide, I guess, during this whole ordeal. And he goes searching for his daughter during it, and he's able to kind of escape by holding Poe hostage and then beating up the guy that grabbed his daughter, who was just hiding under the table. And then he grabs her, puts a blanket over her, and they both jump through the window onto the concrete. And that's really the only glass smashing that I can remember, like the big one.
Yeah,
There
so
might be
there's
more, maybe, but
there's two instances of glass smashing in this scene because he so we get a kind of we get a classic Seagal punch combo where we get a shot of him doing his fast hand thing where he punches a guy in the face 20 times in 15 seconds or whatever. And then he throws him into a vending machine. So we got a glass smash there. And then he jumps out the window with his daughter. So we get another glass smash there. And also, it's also worth pointing out in this scene because it's one of the genuine hilarious moments in the movie. He punches a guy and it makes him look superhuman because the guy falls back into what is apparently the thinnest wall in the world, and it completely crumbles under the guy's weight. And
yeah. We also have Frank showing up right when they come smash through the window. This has all been a planned escape or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, his timing is amazing.
Which is why they're friends, I guess.
I guess. Yeah, he just supports him in every way. Frank's just there for him. I mean, so the only possible reasons are that they've managed to perfectly time this and it was all planned all along, or that Wesley and Frank have telepathy. They have a weird telepathic relationship.
I like to believe in the cowboy telepathy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this should have been further explored. I would like to see the, you know how you keep trying to create, alternate universe, Seagal movies? Well, I suppose this one would actually have to star Seagal, but, the kind of, or maybe not, because it'd be, a younger man. So, the kind of origin story of Dr. Wesley McLaren and Frank's friendship and how that developed. The telepathic cowboy relationship.
when he came in after being in the CIA and wanting to just start fresh and truly help the people.
Yeah, when he first settled down in Ennis, Montana. Yeah. Do I mean, you could just add it to the...
And he learned how to have a southern accent.
Yeah, kinda. Like all Seagal accents, comes and goes, But, I forgot this one, because I've written it down. So when you go back to the ranch, Frank sees the militia coming on the hillside, and we get another random dramatic zoom for no reason. Well, I mean, I suppose there is kind of a reason this time, because he's like, oh shit, those guys are coming. So it kind of makes more sense. What do you think, Kyle?
I mean, I was going to say, I feel like it's still just style points.
Yeah, it's probably
this will look cool. And it does look cool.
It does. I think it works most for this scene because something dramatic is actually happening. Or the previous couple of times it just seemed confusing because it's the FBI are just standing there and Floyd's just standing at the window. Why are these dramatic zooms going back and forth? And the same with Frank. It's just it's just Frank walking in the hospital. I mean, I suppose there's showing that there's a lot of people in the hospital, but I don't know. The other two times it seems confusing. This time, at least it seems it signifies that action might be happening in a second, which it does. Can you tell us about that, Kyle?
Yes. This is when Frank kind of ambushes those guys, right?
Yes.
This is pretty awesome because he gets close enough in these weeds where they can't see him, but he's close enough to throw an entire bundle of dynamite perfectly timed underneath one of their trucks to flip it over and kill a lot of them just in a brutal crash and explosion. And then he picks off one or two guys, has Seagal then is riding up. And then, of course, one of them shoots Frank in the back and kills him. And then Seagal kills that guy. Probably one of the best action moments.
I think it's the best action moment in the movie. And I think what makes it is just before Frank dies, there is a close-up of a guy who's presumed dead who, because he's getting a close-up like that, he's not dead. And then that Frank is going to get shot in the back. But just after Frank thinks he's killed everybody because he dynamites them, and there's like two guys who like spring up and he shoots them. And just after that, he thinks he's defeated all the bad guys. He does a little jig. He just does this little kind of shimmy. Yeah. It's like a kind of victory dance. And it was just the absolute topper to the scene. So it was like, yes, it was my favorite action moment in the movie.
And again, it's an action moment without Seagal.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But they do handle Frank's death pretty well. I will give them that. After the fact, there's really no upset. Yeah. Seagal or Holly aren't upset at all. They're just kind of riding with him on one of the horses.
Well, I mean, it is in the middle of an outbreak, Craig. And we all know how that causes us to control our emotions better.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like middle of the pandemic, that's when you really control your emotions and just get shit done, as everybody has demonstrated in the previous year. So he initially seems a bit emotional about it. Initially he's kind of like, Frank, and then he just like chucks him over the horse and then moves on with life. And then, so Holly and Wesley then ride up to Grandpa's house and, where they bury Frank. They give him a burial, and we get introduced. We are at this point, we get introduced to a character who is made to look like a somewhat important supporting character. But I mean, this is well into the movie, at this stage, I think we're nearly an hour in, and this movie is only 90 minutes long. And, but yeah, we get this other character, Anna. And Dr. Anne Whitecloud is her name. And I like the little back and forth that her and Wesley have about the virus, and she kind of jovially, because it's a Native American character, kind of jovially says like, it's payback for smallpox. Take that, you white fuckers. That's
which begs the question, why help?
That is true. I mean, that would be almost funnier if that character was just like,
that would be great.
Just like exit the movie after that. Just being like, you know what? I don't care. It seems like Native American people are immune, so it sucks for you guys. We're taking our country back. In terms of alienating audiences, that might have been a step too far, I suppose. But yes, so yeah, after that, it's we get more. We get there's a lot of this film that's just kind of dramatic horse riding. We just get big dramatic Western music, lovely nature shots of, the state of Montana does look lovely, but lots of kind of padding of just kind of people looking serious on horses, and we get more of that as we ride off into the secret government facility that nobody knows about, apart from Dr. Wesley McLaren, who obviously used to work there. Craig, do you want to tell us about the secret government facility?
Yeah, so he goes up, they go to this little area, and it's just basically a hatch that will lead down into this, underground facility. And he shows his identification, part of which he made on the computer right beforehand. And he tells them who he is, and then they just open the door and let him in. But when he gets down there, the guards, or the soldiers that are definitely sick, then question him and say that they're just following orders and that they can't be just letting him in. They don't know who he is, until he beats them up, points guns at them, and then they let him go and do his work and try and help them. And they're sick too, because this fits with our current situation. They thought the virus was bullshit. And so they went up to do their training anyways without their hazmat suits.
Which is the most amazing detail to me in this whole movie is like, you guys work in a biochemical lab of some sort, and there's a supposed outbreak, and you're like, nah, that's bullshit. Okay.
That's just like a conspiracy theory, man.
I'm going to go work in this underground hidden lab.
Yeah, where they appear to, I mean, like, because this is the lab that Dr. Wesley McLaren used to work in. And it has been implied throughout the movie that basically his job was to create biological weapons and, and then, come up with ways to contain them as well. And yet, being around that every day does not guard these guards from being like, no, we don't, even though we work in a laboratory where we make these exact sort of things, we don't believe that these things actually exist.
Yeah.
But then again, you can never, it does seem like you say, it does seem like on the money for our times.
I think this version of the Patriot should be shown in schools now as a good example of what will happen.
Or just that scene. I'm just being like, we didn't believe it was a thing. Oh, look at them now. But maybe the other bits as well, because like you say, I mean, it fits in between the, right-wing militias and the, pandemic material. I mean, I suppose it's just kind of ripping off a bunch of things or ripping stuff from the headlines as well, because obviously, that was all kind of prevalent at the time as well, because there was those kind of pandemic movies that kind of kicked off by Outbreak. And I remember, like, if you kind of look at the headlines in the late 90s, I remember everybody being very terrified of things like Ebola and stuff like that. And, and even the kind of militia stuff, because of what had happened throughout the 90s in Waco and the things with the Oklahoma bombing and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff was in the air in the 90s as well, even though it kind of, we can tie it to our time as well. It was bubbling at that time too.
Yeah. It is, we've talked about, very topical.
Yeah, it is very topical. Although I did, like, the interesting thing about the, like, militia stuff is the militia in the movie seems quite similar to an actual militia from the 90s called the Militia of Montana, which was founded by brothers John and David Trockman. And the set of the movie was threatened, like, there was, like, anonymous phone calls that threatened it was threatening the production of the movie that claimed to be from this militia. But then the leader of the militia, John Trockman, denied that they were threatening anybody and said that they would help investigators investigate anything, and even said that he had talked to some of the people the staff on the movie, and felt that he was confident that it would not present all of the militia people as bad people, as kind of crazies. And it does seem quite similar, because, like, I read a little bit about the Militia of Montana, who apparently believed in the New World Order conspiracy, thought that NAFTA was designed to enslave Americans, believed the Second Amendment was designed to provide for armed insurrection against the established government, thought affirmative action was racist, and that individuals who own their land outright should be able to be considered sovereign. So yeah, it seems quite similar to this real life militia. Apparently, they were popular in the 90s, but after 2000, apparently numbers dipped and they kind of faded away.
Damn Y2K. I wonder how much Seagal, like, milked that threat, though. As you can just imagine Seagal just feeling so like proud to continue on.
Oh yeah, probably. He'd probably make this threat sound even worse. That like it probably just like a couple of cranks. It'd be like, stop this production. We'll do something if you don't stop filming this. Whereas like Seagal is like, they threatened to put anthrax on the set, or they like just kind of blow it up out of proportion, and to make himself look more heroic.
He's probably the one that did it. He just wrote the letter and that, where he cut out the letters from newspapers, whatever.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, no, that would be funny if it was just a gal putting on a funny voice, threatening the set, and then being like, yeah it's totally from the militia of Montana. Yeah, and this is kind of where the movie really kind of grinds to a halt, because we get that thing which is like a very movie thing of like being like, how can we visually dramatically show that science is happening? Oh, we'll show liquids boiling in beakers. That is how science happens.
They're like, we have seen movies from the 1950s. We know how to handle this.
Yeah. Just lots of things bubbling in beakers. Just lots of colorful liquids.
And then showing the death count rise, where you have one soldier, in a body bag, and then it goes to 2 soldiers, and having Seagal shake his head occasionally because it's just not working.
And then there's that great shot. I think it's towards the end of the whole sequence, but there's a shot like going down a hallway that Seagal's at the end of, and they keep cutting back and forth to this dramatic like dolly in on Seagal, all weathered from doing science or whatever.
Cup of tea in hand.
Yes. He also does the essential, has to throw stuff around because he's so frustrated about the science not being sciencey enough.
That was like the most ridiculous part of the whole movie, probably, where they're like, we've seen other movies where people are frustrated too, and this is what happened.
Yeah. Like this is one of those moments where it's really kind of, Seagal going for his Oscar again, where he picks up his keyboard and he smashes it off the desk, and like he knocks over some beakers, and like that's how he's at the end of his tether.
I'm surprised they didn't do a callback to the plastic beaker thing.
Yeah, no, I was almost surprised by that as well. It's like, this seems like the perfect moment to drive this into the ground.
But it does get to the last soldier, and he gives one of the best lines, where the soldier's scared of dying, as recurs throughout the thing. They talk about horses, why they go off alone to die, or stuff like that. Well, the soldier's scared of dying, and he gives them an order, and that's not to die.
No. That's right. And his reading of that line is really quite something. But we also discover what the cure is in this scene as well. Can you tell us what the cure is, Kyle?
Oh, yes. It's the homemade tea of Grandpa that Seagal has been drinking. And it just goes to show you that, you can't abuse the land, for it will save you. I don't know. Insert some sort of wisdom here.
Yeah. So some sort of as Grandpa tells us, we can't seek wisdom. We've got to let knowledge come to us. So,
yes.
Not sure. Yeah. So just let the knowledge seep in. That's the lesson here. Somewhat confusing lesson, but
so during this time, I forgot that we kind of skipped over because it's not really important, but we start seeing how there's like a young militia kid who's regretting being a part of the militia, or seeing that Floyd isn't totally truthful. We kind of see that there's more hints with the grandfather and Holly talking about the flowers a little bit. There's a bunch of little scenes that are, again, just like Anne, as I put, what is the purpose of Anne? They're not important at all, but they're nice little fillers.
Yeah, no, that is true. So, like, yes, I do, like, it is, I think it deserves to be mentioned because I do think it's quite a kind of, it's supposed to be this kind of big emotional kind of moment, or this kind of moment where you're supposed to really kind of think for a second or something, you know, it's supposed to kind of tug at the heartstrings, but it just comes off as kind of naff and funny, where, like, at the start of the movie, as we mentioned, Floyd gives a patriotic pop quiz, and we, you know, like, we learn about some Thomas Jefferson quotes, we learn about some FDR quotes, and then, like, I think it's part of the way the kid says it. It's just, he says the line, it's obviously supposed to be really heavy. And he's just like, is this what Thomas Jefferson would have wanted? And Floyd just brushes him off. So, obviously it's supposed to be this big serious moment. And then, obviously, it is not. Because it's a silly movie. But anyway, what's going on with the plot, Kyle?
Well, this is when Floyd kidnaps Seagal and his daughter. I can't remember, like, do they leave they leave the lab and are going home when they get
they leave the lab, and they there's more dramatic horse riding, I think, and they come back to the ranch.
Yes, and they get ambushed.
So this is another just could say this is another bad dad moment where he just, like, tells her to go off and, you know, saddle up the horses, even though he knows these militiamen are after his daughter. He's like, you know, do that while I'm going to just go back into the house.
Yeah. And then, again, it's also one of those scenes, much like Frank's death is super heavily signposted, Holly's kidnapping is also super heavily signposted, where she kind of goes back and she sees the kind of, there's, you know, this kind of close-up shot of, like, the little horse that Seagal saved at the start of the movie, and then you just know that it's like, oh wait, she's obviously going to get kidnapped here, just the way it's set up.
Yeah.
But I think, like, yeah, so, like, after Seagal and his daughter get kidnapped, I thought it was quite funny. Like, obviously the scriptwriters thought it was quite funny as well, which is odd because I'm not sure why they wrote it in the script. But Floyd drinks Merlot, and it's like, oh, that's like, it's highlighted. Like, Seagal's character highlights it, of this being strange, but it's quite a funny moment. I don't know if you were as tickled by it, guys.
I didn't catch that, but that is pretty ridiculous.
Oh yeah, no, he offers Dr. Wesley McLaren a glass of Merlot.
That's such a weird way to try to say that he's, like, not a genuine militia guy, with the implication that he wouldn't drink wine or something.
Like, they just, they have, like, this weird conversation afterwards where, like, Seagal's like, oh, that seems like an odd drink for a good old boy. And then he's like, I don't see myself as a good old boy. I see myself as a gentleman farmer.
I do remember him saying that.
Then comes, it's basically one of the most anticlimactic fights. It's over so quickly, just all of it in any Seagal movie that I've seen, you know, up until this point.
Well, and so before that fight breaks out, there are two things I wanted to point out that Floyd says. He brings up MK Ultra, like, out of nowhere, which is just, I guess, just to say he's a crazy conspiracy theorist. But then he says Lebensraum, which is German, which I guess is supposed to imply some sort of, like, Nazi thing, but it's actually just, like, a classical song from the 1800s, so it makes no sense.
Yes, he says that in such a way to suggest that the government and the CIA are Nazis. But
yes,
it's an odd moment. Yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know, like, I almost feel like that part was like Seagal of, like, just being like, oh yeah, let's have some like conspiracy theory stuff in there because like that's always fun. And yeah, also the other kind of confusing thing about this scene is like when he starts talking about MK Ultra, Floyd kind of says like, of course you know all about that stuff, suggesting that Floyd somehow knows all about Wesley's CIA background, or that Wesley advertises his CIA background around town so everybody in Ennis, Montana knows about Dr. Wesley McLaren's former CIA life.
Which kind of makes sense.
I feel like you would.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
true.
it kind of fits in with like probably stuff that maybe got cut, because we don't have any cool Seagal stuff in here. Aside from his friend, that's the virologist or whatever, we don't ever have the typical Seagal, like, he's such a badass because of this scene. So maybe that was a scene in the script or something.
Yeah. I think, because there's not much of that at all. And I think, like, the only kind of badassery is kind of scenes around, like, oh, what a badass is connected around his intellect. And, like, the closest we kind of get to that is, like, he's the only man on the list scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then other than that, we don't really get much of anything in regards to the typical Seagal tropes on that. You know, I mean, there's not a lot of the typical Seagal tropes actually at all. Like, as we mentioned, we only get 2 glass smashes, and they're, neither are that spectacular.
That's wwhy I felt like it was meant to be a Kevin Costner movie or something. There's like some part of it that feels like it was. Most of them aren't really Seagal movies, but they add the Seagal stuff to it. But this one feels even more so. I feel like that it wasn't a Seagal film. It was meant for an entirely different actor.
That's the odd thing about this movie, actually, because there's other films like that. I mean, we discussed that last time in the Far Down Below episode that, like, it wasn't initially a Seagal project. It was like rewritten for Seagal. It was initially offered to Bruce Willis and he turned it down, and then it was, it had a rewrite. It became the Seagal film. But as far as I'm aware, as far as I ran into it, like, after the contract ended with what was cancelled by Warner Brothers, this film was largely financed by Seagal and his production partner and their production company. I'm just trying to remember his then production partner he fell out with, Julius Nassau. So it was Seagal Nassau production, and I think they like mainly raised the finance on this picture. So I don't know. Like, it seems like it was pretty much a Seagal project from the get-go. I can understand where you're coming from of feeling like it's, could be like a Kevin Costner project or something like that. But it seems like it was got this kind of project together, and then it was like put out by Touchstone. So I mean,
maybe because of his, I was just gonna say maybe because of his age, or that he was getting a little bit slower or something. He was trying to do like a career shift into more dramatic territory or something. I don't know.
Possibly. I mean, obviously he's wanting to. I mean, because of his discovering of his spiritual awakening, as he described it, that happened around 96 when he was doing Glimmerman, and he was wanting to do more peaceful pictures that promoted peace and spiritual things. And also on top of that, he seemed less keen on physical exertion of any sorts, because he was kind of slowing down, because at that time he would have been in his late 40s, which, is positively sprightly nowadays. But at the time, was on the older side for the action star. But, I mean, you can be starting as an action star in your late 40s nowadays, so. But, so we're really quite, so we didn't actually mention how Floyd died. Like you said, he dies in kind of slightly anticlimactic fashion, but rather brutal fashion as well. So it's kind of satisfying, just the brutality of it. But do you want to talk about that, Craig?
Sure. So during the drinking of the Merlot, Seagal or Wesley ends up snapping the cup snapping the stem of the wine glass off without apparently the glass breaking or anything. And then he just quickly stabs the wine glass stem into Floyd's head. And then he shoots one of them. I think he punches out another guard, and then he finds Poe with his daughter Holly, and Poe is having the change of heart that kind of pops up, kind of doesn't throughout the movie, but saying that he doesn't want to die and it wasn't really ever his idea and he warned everybody against it. And so Wesley says he's not going to kill him and he just knocks him out, and then they leave. And that's basically it for the fight.
But I mean, we do get some entertainment because they leave and we get a shot of them running away from the ranch, and we get some of that classic uncoordinated Seagal run, which I always, any scene of Seagal running always entertains me, so that amused me. He always has his arms flailing, yes. And it's always like, I don't know where he learned to run, but it's one of the oddest runs I've seen. And then that's basically the end of the movie, but it's not quite the end of the movie, is it, Kyle? Tell us how the movie goes on out.
It's not quite the end because they make it to town and the government is dropping all the leaves the petals from the wildflowers that are the cure down on the town, telling everyone they're going to be okay and that they just need to pick up these petals and like boil them in water. And it's the perfect ending.
It makes
the worst
as much sense as anything else in this film, I suppose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Greg, you were going to say something?
The worst part for me is that they just scatter the petals all over the ground. It's not like they collect them and then hand them out to the citizens. So now these people have to then run around and pick up dirty petals on the street or stuff like that themselves.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't. I mean, like, I did think of, there's so many ways they could have done it, but obviously they picked the most insane way. Like they don't go around giving bags of the petals to people. They don't like brew the tea and like have trays of tea going around the town. No. They fill up the helicopters full of petals and just drop them on the town. And they just randomly pick them up off the street, just kind of brush the muck off them, stick them in a cup of tea, boil them up. There you go. I'm sure you'll be fine. That's what they say, like you will be fine if you do this. Just do that. And, I mean, there's the other issue as well, is that, what if there seems to be like a lot of older people in town, what if they're hard of hearing? They don't fully hear the instructions. They're like, what are we supposed to do with these pedals again? Oh, look, oh no, the helicopter's gone. Oh no, I'm just gonna die.
Well, yeah. What if they're too sick to even get up and
exactly.
get the pedals themselves?
Exactly. Like there's a lot of people in the hospital who are currently near the point of death who do not have the strength to be picking up petals or even boiling a kettle. Yep. I mean, it is literally the least practical way to do it, but as Kyle pointed out, the absolute perfect way for this movie to do it. Okay. So that is the end of The Patriot. That's how we go out. And we just go out with some, we don't go out with a Seagal co-written song this time. Just go out with some kind of vaguely Native American sounding music. And that's how the movie wraps up. And I don't know, shall we do best and worst? I'm not sure what best and worst is, but like, yeah, well, let's do best and worst. Craig, first.
Yep. So my best is probably the LQ Jones fight scene. Well, the little bit of, I guess, battle that he has. Or Yeah, that's it. I don't know what else. But my worst is actually probably the kind of just the end fight, and just, yeah, it's just very anticlimactic. And I think the switch around of, I don't know, the plot, I felt like, and I talked to Kyle beforehand, that almost feels like the discovery of the cure and everything should have been before the hospital massacre fight scene, or some sort of way of doing that, of building up. But yeah, so I guess the finding the cure portion that just becomes really a lull in the movie is my worst.
Okay. And Kyle?
Yeah, mine's basically the exact same. LQ Jones throwing dynamite is obviously the best, and then the science montage is kind of the best worst.
Yeah, like I want to be a kind of rogue. I want to be out there, pick something different. But no, I mean, like, that is it's not. I can't, because like it pretty much is the best and worst. Like the LQ Jones action sequence, definitely the only kind of action movie bit of the film that's like a proper kind of fist pumping action-y moment, so that you can actually be like, yeah, yeah. So I think it is, but I think it's the best action sequence. I think it's the best, it's the most exciting moment in the movie, and it's the most entertaining moment in the movie, and it's just made totally perfect by the little dance that LQ Jones does after he thinks victory has been completed before his tragic downfall. And then, yeah, like, I mean, the narrative momentum of the film completely dies a death in the secret facility scenes. And like you say, the character of Dr. Anne Whitecloud is just a nothing character. It feels like she should have more to do. She essentially is just there to give Seagal cups of tea. And we just get this thing of this kind of shot of like more bodies being in the hall. First one body, then two, then, like there's just more and more body bags around the hall as we see Seagal looking more and more forlorn. And yeah, I mean, I suppose, yeah, I mean, that's really the worst. But I mean, the other thing is its oddly, kind of troublingly ambivalent attitude towards far right militias is another worst. But in terms of like the actual narrative, it really just the whole film comes to a kind of shuddering halt at that point. So I think we're all on board on the best and worst of this movie. And yeah, I mean, like, it's not good enough to be like a good thriller. It's not deep enough to really look into the political aspects. It's not a great Western. It's only got like 10 minutes of action and a 90-minute apparently action movie. It's not great, and that's why it goes down as many Seagal's fans' least favorite movies, I suppose, because even some of the really bad ones are really, really quite funny. But I suppose we should move on.
But it does have great landscape.
Yes, I mean, Dean Semler, didn't do the cinematography for this movie, but he has the directorial eye of a cinematographer. And if you want dramatic horse riding and you want loving shots of the Montana landscape, then this is the film for you. As long as you don't care about much else happening in the film and kind of just going on that. I mean, that's us. You're free, Craig. You're free. Seagal, there's no more Seagal in sight for you.
Yeah.
Because that was the last Seagal film of the 90s. He would not do another action movie. He would appear in 1998's My Giant, which is a terrible Billy Crystal film. and he would also appear in an episode of Roseanne in 1998. Where that weird final season of Roseanne where they win the lottery and everybody stopped liking Roseanne. In that one. So, that was his 90s. He wouldn't do anything in 1999. And he would keep making direct-to-video movies pretty much after that. He would try a theatrical comeback a couple of times in the early 2000s, which we can't talk about like those movies because that's the 2000s. This is an all 90s all the time podcast. So like we're just talking about that. But yes, he would try that a couple of times with Exit Wounds, which if you are a Seagal film, worth checking out. And he would also try it with Half Past Dead, which even if you are a Seagal film fan, no, not worth checking out. So there you go. And then and then he made 1 million direct-to-video, direct-to-DVD films in the preceding 20 years or whatever, some of which are quite fun, so most of which, I wouldn't even bother watching myself. There's a few I've read about in the Seagalology book, and I'm just like, I'm not touching that with a barge pole, but there is a couple of ones in there that are quite fun. And, but basically, the highlight of his post-2000 output is probably Exit Wounds, and the best stuff was the 90s. So you're really getting off the hook, really, Craig. Because if this was all 2000s action all the time, it'd get real dark.
Yeah, I have seen the vampire one. Or zombie one or whatever, where it's basically a Blade knockoff. Against the Dark.
I've not watched that. That's supposed to be one of his very worst. I mean, that has a terrible IMDb rating. That's got one of his lowest IMDb ratings of any of his movies.
Yeah.
Really scraped the bottom of the barrel, Craig. Even for Seagal. Even by Seagal standards, you've scraped the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
What's the worst of his 2000 output you've seen, Kyle?
I guess it would be Half Past Dead, because I think I've only seen Exit Wounds and Half Past Dead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I hadn't seen most of his direct-to-video stuff at the time. I've subsequently, after reading the Seagalology book, checked out a couple of his direct-to-video efforts that the book said were a bit better in in the turn of this year. But yeah, at the time, I think the only direct-to-video one I saw, kind of near the time of release, was Belly of the Beast. And then, pretty much, which was 2003. And then pretty much I stopped watching Seagal movies after that, at that time in the kind of early 2000s, after being a fan throughout the 90s. And just, it got too much. Half Past Dead was... Yes, Craig?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I had a question for you, Scott.
Yes.
About... so much of, Seagal, where you have these other action stars that kind of have this, this international appeal, also because they're, born from another country. You have Schwarzenegger, you have Lambert, you have Jean-Claude Van Damme, all of them.
Sure.
But Seagal is so much kind of, even in his work, about here's the American people and, the down to the earth, even though he can't match with them or anything or relate to them in any way because of his acting. But I was actually really curious watching all these. I wonder what it was like, I guess how Seagal is in an international market versus somebody, like Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, all of the other action stars that we will be covering if you keep listening to this podcast.
Which hopefully you will. The next season we will be covering Stallone, and that'll be coming in a little while. But I think Seagal, certainly initially, because if you look at his box office, there's not the divide is quite even, in terms of what he brought in domestically and what he brought in internationally. I think he would even bring in slightly more internationally than in America.
Okay.
And throughout the 90s. And I feel like part of the reason for that might be the targets that he is against. So the fact that he wasn't just another action star fighting the Russians or whatever, that he was like fighting the man, and he was like fighting American foreign policy, and like his first movie Nico like directly targets the Iran-Contra affair, for example. So like, because at least superficially they have like this kind of more liberal leaning, I feel like that might appeal to a European audience or an international audience. I don't know. Like, I mean, I think it was certainly as a kid, I think it was part of the appeal for me. And I feel like he's kind of familiar as well. Like, I was thinking about the persona that like Seagal is kind of his own franchise. Like any franchise has its kind of rules and things that you can kind of check off the list of like, okay, that's got to be in this movie. That's got to be, like there's certain things that have to be in a Mission Impossible movie. There's certain things that have to be in a Bond movie. And I think like Seagal movies are kind of the same. I don't know if that's, would have any greater appeal to an international audience, but it's just something I noticed. And also, I feel like his persona, like I was thinking about Seagal's persona, and I was thinking Seagal is essentially Bruce Bond, like in that he has taken like parts of Bruce Lee's persona, like, nobody is a physical match for him. He has a tendency to kind of, kind of philosophize and kind of, act wise, even though Bruce Lee does a much more convincing job of that. And, and he's also like, he's very much like James Bond, like kind of, the kind of how badass is he scene kind of happens in James Bond a lot, kind of, because James Bond is a great action hero and a terrible spy because everybody knows who James Bond is. And just like in a Seagal movie where there's, nearly everybody knows who Seagal is, just like nearly everybody knows who Bond is, apart from like one guy who asks like, who is this guy? And then we get like an expositionary dump of like, how great Bond is, stroke how great Seagal is. And also, much like Bond, he is like always the smartest guy in every room, like he's always portrayed as being like, he's multilingual and he's knowledgeable about this thing and that thing. And so I feel like he's like, maybe there's a familiarity to that persona as well, to like an Asian audience, a European audience, because I feel like he has taken parts of James Bond and he's taken parts of Bruce Lee and he's added his own ponytailed Aikido thing onto it, and then that's who he is. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
No, it does. I mean, I just know I grew up in rural northern Michigan, and it was kind of one of those things where, like, growing up during that time, it was even for somebody like Stallone, if it wasn't a Rocky movie or Rambo movie, nobody really seemed to care. But Seagal was surprisingly big here. Mm-hmm. But I was where I didn't watch a Seagal movie, but I loved Stallone or Lambert or Jean-Claude Van Damme, but they seemed in a way almost like they were more sensitive because of their approach to the martial art aspect. I don't know. It just felt like, Seagal is a very like Americana action star. So I was just curious how he would have worked elsewhere.
I don't know, because he tries to input these elements of like Asian elements and different elements. And he tries to kind of like, because I don't think, for example, there's certain American action stars who like, have never had an international audience. Like, because they're so American, like international audiences just don't understand them. Like Chuck Norris. Like Chuck Norris has like you know, his movies, you know, made some money in America. Like, I know, like, he was never like a massive box office star. You know, he was always like a B movie action star. But like, yeah, you know, like, I don't think, like, his kind of bigger ones, Delta Force or Missing in Action, Lone Wolf McQuade or whatever. Like, if you looked at the box office numbers, it'd be like, they probably made like nothing in Europe. And I feel like, cause he's super American in a way that I think international audiences are kind of off put by.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense. Yeah. That's why I was just curious. And watching more now, I can understand it, you know, since I've actually watched some of these, but I think, coming from it as a novice or things like that, that's kind of the view I got. At least, you know, growing up and watching all these as a child and then, you know, growing out of it.
Yeah. Okay. For sure.
But yeah, it makes sense what you're saying.
And also, like, while I remember, actually, on a completely different note, I do want to make a correction from the previous episode because I don't want to be giving out fake news, basically. I don't want to be giving out the wrong information. So I do want to make a correction from the previous episode. So in the previous episode, if you listen to our Fur Down Below episode, I made an analogy between applying logic to a Seagal movie and that driving you insane, just like it would drive you insane if you thought too hard about the geography of the Marvel Universe. Now, I feel this point was correct in essence because so much of the Marvel Universe live and work in New York. However, I said in my little rant that Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and Iron Man all live in Manhattan. After the recording, I remembered that our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man actually comes from Queens, and then I also was like, I don't think Iron Man comes from Manhattan either. And he doesn't. He comes from Long Island. So just in case you are a Marvel fan listening to the show and you got kind of all worked up, there's no need to get worked up because I'm correcting it right here and now. I just want you all to know that Spider-Man, Queens, Iron Man, Long Island, Fantastic Four, actually Manhattan. That was the one I got correct. One. So even by Meatloaf standards, I'm failing. You know, it's 1 out of 3 is bad. So there you go. But I just wanted to make that correction before we move on to the end of season awards. So as we move on to the end of, because we've reached the end of this Seagal season and we need to wrap up. So we'll quickly go round. Craig, you go first. So your choices for in whatever order you want to give them, your best Seagal film of the ones you've covered, your worst, your best villain, and your best Seagal beatdown. I mean, like, I was going to say best Seagal fight scenes, but I've decided to describe them as beatdowns because, like, the other person doesn't usually get much of a chance. So, like, so that's best film, worst film, best villain, best Seagal beatdown. What are your choices, Craig?
Okay, so my best film is actually going to be the first one that I covered, since I'm only going off of what I've covered on here. And it is On Deadly Ground. The reason for that, and I've talked about in the other episodes, is just because of, I guess, coming into it and how silly it was. And that even though it does take itself so seriously, it feels kind of like a mock of, like something like a shoot 'em up or some kind of spoof of what an action movie is. And and it had an over-the-top amount of Seagal-isms that I got to learn from all of you guys. So that was great. And my worst, I actually will have to say The Patriot, I think. I think Glimmerman is close, but there's kind of parts in Glimmerman that work, that I've talked about, or there's characters that work, or such as like Brian Cox is villain, that I think kind of beat The Patriot out. My best fight, my best beatdown, it's actually a dual part. The solo one is Everett McGill in Under Siege 2. But then the kind of group beatdown that he likes to do in a bar is the On Deadly Ground one, because it ends with it takes time for the whole, what is the essence of a man, or line.
What does it take to change the essence of a man?
And then my best yes. And it's time. And I thought, and again, because it's so ridiculous and silly, that's what I chose for my group beatdown. And then the best villain, just because of his sadism and whatever reason, is Everett McGill as the kind of mercenary leader.
All right. Okay. So not going for a lead.
That's it for me.
The right-hand man. Okay. So, Kyle, we got best film, worst film, best villain, best Seagal beatdown. What's your choices?
All right. So best film, I'm going to go with, I'm actually going to go with Hard to Kill because of the 7-year coma, the training montage, and the O'Malley of it all.
We still never got justice for O'Malley, man.
No, we need to make that a hashtag.
Hashtag justice for O'Malley. Release the Seagal cut. You know?
Yeah, which is just a shot of them at the funeral with no dialogue or something. So yeah, I mean, worst, I'm gonna have to go with the Patriot too, just because. Yeah, I don't even know if it's the worst film, but it's definitely the worst Seagal film. Yes. Best villain is going to have to be Screwface, mainly for the name, but also just because he has voodoo, supernatural supposed powers. And then best fight is got to be, I mean, it's Out for Justice, the pool hall scene.
Yeah, right. Yeah. For sure. And I mean, yeah, I would totally concur with that. In fact, I think a couple of my awards would be, I mean, nearly all of them I think would be the same as yours, Kyle, because the best Seagal beatdown, best fight is definitely the pool hall scene in Out for Justice. It's the apex of his career in terms of showing off his martial arts, and there's so many different elements to that scene, and I think the height, the kind of zenith of the scene is the stick fight that he has with Dana DeSanto. It's amazing. Yes, it's for sure the best fight scene. There's other ones that I think are very good as well, including the, what does it take to change an essence of a man, cupcake scene in, On Deadly Ground. There's a few ones. The liquor store fight in Hard to Kill is really good, but no, it's definitely that fight scene in Out for Justice. I was tempted to go with the Tommy Lee Jones, Gary Busey combo for the best villain, but I think I will also go for Screwface as best villain because, yeah, I think it's just a kind of, it's such a wacky character, and I just think, and with all the voodoo and stuff, and just the crazy eyes that he has, and it's it's really, I feel, I mean, talking about Bond is almost a Bond villain or something like that. It's a really memorable villain, and as much as I love Tommy Lee Jones's performance in Under Siege, I think that Basil Wallace's performance as Screwface in Marked for Death is just maybe even more over the top, and the reveal that he has a twin as well, and there's the kind of it's been implied that he's like magic and he can be in two places at once, and it's just that there's just been twins all along. Oh, it's so good. So yeah, I think Screwface is my best villain. And agreeing with you again, agreeing with both of you, worst film is The Patriot. Just because it's the dullest watch. I mean, I didn't hate it. I wasn't constantly looking at my watch or anything, but it is for sure the dullest watch. It's for sure the one that doesn't, I mean, even more than Glimmerman, which it doesn't work, but just its sheer insanity kind of keeps you kind of oddly captivated of just being like, none of this melds, none of this, like, who wrote this? Like, how can there possibly be only one credited screenwriter? It doesn't make any goddamn sense. Like, yeah, but yeah, The Patriot. It's just not. I mean, as we covered, we really kind of stretched out the kind of highlights of the movie. We could have gone through it much quicker because, like, there's so much padding. There's so much kind of just riding around in horses or staring at blood samples or looking at beakers or whatever. And but the one I'm going to be different is my best film. I'm going to end with my best film, and that is Under Siege. It was the first Steven Seagal movie I saw as a kid. It's what made me become a Steven Seagal fan. It's the one I have watched the most. I just love that movie. And it's honestly, I know that objectively it's not like an action masterpiece by any standards, but it is genuinely one of my favorite action movies of the 90s. And yeah, so my best film is definitely Under Siege. And that's it. That's it all over.
Can I add?
Yeah, you can add something, Craig. Go ahead.
Can I add? Yeah. Could I add one more award to give out? Yes. Okay. Curveball award. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'd just like to say that I'd like to give the award out for the best little bit of Seagal history to the very famous DeMarco case of Silverman.
Oh dear. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, the very famous DeMarco case that was very well explained, and we all know absolutely what everybody means when they say the DeMarco case. Yeah, I don't know. Like we should have maybe done like a kind of best of like how badass is this guy? Like I think. If we were doing that, I think one of my favorites on that scale would actually be the Casey fucking Ryback scene in Under Siege 2. I think that's a classic of how badass is this guy. Just right after, like, just when Eric Bagassian opens up the file that he has that's got like his memoirs, Ryback's Tactics. And if we're giving out
Deadly Ground has some great ones too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, On Deadly Ground, like, both visually and in dialogue has some great kind of how badass is this guy. Like, the kind of little speech that Michael Caine gives about him, and then the little speech that R. Lee Emery gives about him, about the, you could, I can't remember. It's like you could dump him in Alaska or something, and he'd turn up with a. So I can't. I wish I could like go back and listen to the episode and remember the quote that I read out. But and then there's the Michael Caine thing about him being like your worst fucking nightmare kind of thing, which is also amazing. Also, like in terms of the kind of showing how badass he is, the loving hero shot that he gets right at the start of the movie when he steps off the helicopter, that's also amazing. And the fact that it made only funnier by the fact that the movie was directed by Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
Ah, dear. And then so that I mean, Kyle, do you want to hand out any more random awards before we go out?
No, I feel we've done enough.
We've done enough. We've talked about Seagal enough. It's time to put this season to bed. It's time to thank you very much, listener, for tuning into this latest episode of All 90s Action all the time. If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, basically wherever you listen to podcasts. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your pets, whatever. We don't mind. We'll take any listeners, that we can get. And also be sure to tune in next time, where we will be having a special bonus episode where we will be covering the film Rapid Fire. But I just want to thank you all again for checking out this season. Hope you all enjoyed it. Though we'll be back next week, and then after that there'll be about a month break, and then we'll come back for season 2 with Sylvester Stallone. But until next time, see you guys.